Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Not Another Whisky Podcast, a show where we bring you the best guests, the best news and the best whisky to sip, all packaged up, tied in a bow and presented to you on a silver platter by your two overserved but never overrated hosts. I'm Nicholas Polacki, joined as always by my brother-in-arms, Mitch Bouchard. Mitch, how you doing, mate?
Good, man.
Not bad.
Definitely. I like that, overserved.
Thanks,
that's how
man.
you were last night. Did you put that in there because you were overserved last night? Is that what you're saying?
So the owners of our Japanese distilleries were in New York last night, and I went out to meet them for afternoon drinking. And the Scotland game was on, so I was then commiserating myself with a little bit more than I probably
console
should have
yourself.
100%, Chip. I had to console myself.
Dude, I think I saw that with the text message you sent me, which I just had no idea what the fuck was going on in that, you know?
It was absolute. I read it this morning and went, what the fuck? I tried to text him something and I read it back and I was like, I don't even know what I was trying to say. There's a couple. I actually had to do two things. Like, this is two things I had to do this morning: reread texts that I sent, and then go to my outbox and make sure I hadn't sent emails I definitely shouldn't have sent.
Drunk texting.
Drunk
Drink
texting. 100%.
Yeah.
So, laddies and lassies, we are joined today by an absolute whiskey legend.
Thank you.
So I'm pretty excited about this show. So a couple of things before we get into it. We have a very special guest. If I'm not mistaken, he's one of the first guests who've ever made American whiskies. This man's a legend in the craft whiskey world. He has literally hand-built his own distillery and then sold it. He's made one of the most awarded American whiskies to ever launch. He's just released a Japanese whiskey, which we'll get into as well at the end. And he's helped and consulted with numerous brands and is now heading up the spirits portfolio for Folio Wines and Spirits here in the USA. Most importantly, he's a dear friend of mine. Laddies and lassies, welcome Mr. Chip Tate.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. What an intro.
Great to
We'll
have
add
you,
in
Chip.
the standing ovation and the post. I don't know
Yeah,
if you've heard the
crowd
show,
goes
Chip.
I mean,
Born to it.
that's a really impressive intro that you just gave, Chip, Nicholas. So Chip, you're one of the first people to ever make American whiskies. That's what Nicholas just said about
No,
you.
one of the first people
You're
on our
getting
show.
on a little bit, mate.
Texas. Yeah,
You
Texas.
didn't put the show in there.
Oh, did I not?
Yeah, I think
Sorry
that
about
might
that.
be oversold a little bit.
Well,
I
Chip
think
is
as far as
245 years old, so
I'm remarkably well preserved.
pickled,
No.
some may say.
Amazing to
My
have you,
little-
Chip. And you know, like Nicholas was trying to say there, you are the first American whiskey maker that we've had on the show, which is great.
Yeah.
And obviously, I've heard a load about you from Nicholas, and I know about you as well from my time in the US. I remember when I was over there, and Balcones first hit. And
Yeah.
my good friend and mentee, Mr. Ian Miller, I don't know if you remember him from Glenfiddich, he came over and
Yes.
visited you in Texas. I think that must have been,
Yes.
I don't know,
That was amazing.
2012, something like that. Around about that
Mhm.
time.
It was such an
Mhm.
honor, and I kept trying to explain to everybody, this is Ian Miller, and they're like, who's that? And I'm like, oh God, and I'd show them the
Yeah.
bottles, like that guy, like, yeah, that guy. So that was a huge honor. Yeah, no, I mean, Texas whiskey has really been my thing, but now obviously I've expanded out beyond that with my work with Foley and then now the Japanese whiskey.
So, Chip,
Absolutely, and we want to get into that, but first tell us a little bit about how you got into whiskey in the first place, because I know that's not your background originally, right?
Well, yeah, I have kind of a mixed background, so I'll give you the short version. I mean, my dad was a nuclear engineer, and so I did a short stint in that business. I mean, really as a lackey, third class, way at the bottom. Did some physics and such, but decided to go a different route. Ended up studying philosophy and religion, and so all this time I was really just a rabid cook and brewer. Brewing had really been my thing for years, and then it was round about, I guess, 2004 or 5. I really was becoming much more of a whiskey drinker. And skipping forward a bit, I essentially decided that I was going to found a Texas whiskey tradition. So I'd incidentally had some training in whiskey, which I could touch on later, but it was the one year that the Institute of Brewing combined with the Guild of Distillers. And that one year they had a test that included all of the above, brewing and distilling in one. So I hadn't intended at that point to go into distilling. But when the idea struck me, I thought, well, these people seem to think I have some credential. I don't know. I could give it a go. And off I went. And it it turned out well. So that was 2008. And with Balcones, I didn't intend to be an equipment maker, but I was broke. And so I had to build a lot of the things I needed, um, which was actually very educational as well, because there's nothing makes you understand a thing better than to have to make it yourself. You're not just selecting something off the shelf. You have to say, well, what is this supposed to do? And why do I want it to act like this or do like that? So that was really how we ended up founding our own kind of little internal traditions, our own methodologies. And that's what became Balcones. So that's
And that was, correct me if I'm wrong here, Chip, but that was the first whiskey out of Texas, right? It wasn't.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we launched the original Texas whiskey. Even though I was focusing on malt as a long-term goal, but the first thing we had out actually was a blue corn whiskey, which I remember sitting down the first time and tasting Nicholas on that. And it was supposed to be kind of I don't want to say an anti-bourbon, because I have tremendous respect for bourbon and work in it quite a bit, but the idea that somebody should just do another bourbon conventionally seemed a bit boring. So I thought, okay, what's at the essence of this? And of course, the one thing that bourbon always has to have is corn, majority 51% or more. So I thought, what if we built a whiskey around the concept of a deep, rich flavored corn? We actually used a traditional Native American corn that was then roasted and used that as the focal point of the whiskey. So it was, we called it Baby Blue was the first release. It was more of like a reposado aging strategy in terms of certainly an effect of the wood, but it was second fiddle to the character of the spirit. Mm-hmm. And I was also kind of taking that out of the Scots playbook as well, as you all know, many different great Scotch whiskeys, but I think at the heart of it is the bourbon fill cask, which is about emphasizing the quality of the spirit first and foremost. So that was the whole idea. That's
really cool. You just touched on it a little bit about how we first met, and actually that was my next question, because I love this story, because I'm going to call you a sneaky bastard, because that's basically what you did. You're a sneaky bastard, and you didn't tell me who you were, and you didn't tell me what you really did. You just kind of came up to me and sprung it on me. And to preface this story, because I do want you to tell the story, Chip, but to preface this story, Mitch and I know this because when we both worked in the States, obviously I worked on Balvenie, Mitch worked on Glenfiddich, people did come up to us and say, hey, I make stuff at home, want to try my whiskey? And on more than one occasion, I actually remember drinking some stuff with Mitch, and I think I hallucinated. Like, I remember having like one of the, like, we should never drink this stuff again. I remember pouring stuff down my drain in Newport Beach and going,
hey, that's why I wear glasses now. Almost made me blind.
Mitch used to have a full head of hair before that experience.
Yeah.
But, and it really was like, there was times where I was like, I woke up and I was like, I can't remember what happened. And we only had 2 of those whiskeys. Like, what happened? Like, where am I? And we kind of at that point had vowed never to drink people's whiskeys like that again. And then you showed up. So tell our listeners the story. It's pretty funny.
Well, I remember distinctly because this was now it's so big, but craft as for spirits was really coming up, right? I mean, it had been coming up for some years, but I would say the 2000 to 2010 in that area, there was a lot of new excitement about craft whiskey in America. And that was when Balvenie launched their craft campaign, as you know.
Yep.
And they did invites to this event in Austin of craftsmen around the state, or at least the central part. And I got an invite. And I thought, I was somewhere between intrigued and skeptical. I was thinking, like, this is brilliant marketing, right? Are they craft? Not in the same sense of like having been recently founded, but in the sense of what they did as a message. I was like, okay, I like that. So I went and met you. And you gave a brilliant tasting. I remember thinking, I've told you this before. I just stood there thinking like that is how it's done. Like that is how it should be done. And so I wanted to see what you thought of it afterwards. Yeah, it's true. Well,
come on, man. He's got a big enough head as it is.
Yeah, I know. I'm making it worse. I've never, in fairness, seen Mitch do a tasting. I'm sure you're brilliant as well. But
way better than him.
We'll do a taste off someday, and compare notes. But no, I mean, it was great. And then, as he said, I walked up to him after and and poured him a few things. And I guess what year was that? Was that 12? What year was that,
2000,
Nicholas?
I think it was 2011, maybe
11.
late
Yeah.
2011.
So we just had the malt out, I think, and
Yep.
the blue corn, obviously. And anyway, so yeah, we ended up going to the W Hotel afterward and just talking whiskey for hours.
Yeah,
Not just
thankfully you
talking
finished
whiskey.
that sentence. It wasn't that
Yeah,
good at
talk.
tasting.
Yeah,
Then we went back to
and the
my hotel
tasting.
and
Well, it was a hotel.
it was
Yes, we were at the W bar. Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, and that was really kind of the beginning, and I got to hear about what you guys have been up to with the whole craft campaign. And what was that car you had? Was
Oh,
it Bentley?
the Morgan +8.
Morgan.
The Morgan. That's
Yeah,
what
it's
it was.
killer, wasn't it?
Yeah,
But
that
for
was
me, what
cool.
really struck me about that, Chip, was your story. Like you kind of came up to me and you were like, I make whiskey. I'd like your opinion. And we sat and chatted till about 3 or 4 in the morning about
Yeah,
all
it
the different
was.
things that you were doing. And it was just cool because you had this little, I just remember it was like Mary Poppins bag of little drams that just kept appearing. Like,
Yeah,
how big is that fucking bag you've got? Because we were like,
yeah.
what about this? And here I'm experimenting with this. And to me, it was the first time, and I've said
Mm,
this before, there's a lot of distilleries that come out and say things. Usually the sentence is, we're the first people to make whiskey since Prohibition in X
right,
market. And
right.
for me, that never happened with you. You were like we're not trying. I think for, how do I phrase this? You weren't trying to create craft whiskey. You were trying to make excellent whiskey. And there's a fine line
Mm,
between craft and crap, right? There's that
hmm
fine line of, yeah, you've got a cool story, but you don't really know what you're doing with a still and with your maturation. And the whiskey is, yeah, your story is
mm,
incredible, but your whiskey, yeah. And I found that there was a lot of brands, and since then, I would arguably say a lot of those brands have disappeared. And now what we're
hmm
left with since that time period, like 2010, 2011, 2012, when a lot of these distilleries were kind of popping up, now what we're left with is the kind of cream of that crop. The ones
hmm
that were actually knew what they were doing with a still, knew what they were
hmm
doing with maturation, and knew how to blend. And that's really where
And
you
that's a key
stood out
part
at that
too.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean you're absolutely right about that. And I just always felt strongly that I guess this is rhetoric, but you don't introduce yourself and say, "Hi, I'm Chip. I'm a great painter." You walk up and you say, "I paint. I like to show you what I painted." And if you think it's great, that's a judgment that you can make. But to say it almost weakens the argument. You should just present what you've done and talk about it, and then let people make their own minds up.
Well, Mitch
So
walks into
that's kind
parties telling people he's the coolest guy in the room. So I think you've proved your point.
of. I have no comment. I have no comment.
I wish I don't go to parties anymore.
To be fair, I was going to say
Yeah,
he does
right.
that when he walks in his own front door as well.
You have to, right? Does everyone not do that?
Yeah, well, you've got to sell yourself, right, to some degree.
Mitch is the only guy who's changed his doorbell to a theme tune so he can walk in when he's being announced.
Theme music. Dun, dun,
It's funny because I do actually. I've got a Ring doorbell, right, and we changed it to like a Christmas theme tune over Christmas, and I can't work out how to change it back again. So it's just like jingle bells every time everyone fucking rings the doorbell now. It's horrendous.
I can tell you,
Well,
actually, I can tell you because I've done it. You need to do it in the app.
Thanks, man.
that makes sense.
But anyway, let's get back to business here, Chip. So let's chat about life after Balcones. What happened when you left there? I know you went on and founded your own company, and tell us about what's been going on
Founded
since.
my own company. That actually kind of ended up being killed by COVID, or at least in terms of funding. So as a distillery, it never really went anywhere. But I spent that 9 years making stills. I think I've showed you some of those pictures, Nicholas, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember, but yeah. So I was making, I think the smallest we made was like 600 gallon. The largest was like 4,000 gallon. But these were a lot of what we were doing too is direct fire stills, which certainly people like Forsyth or McMillan will make, but they'll kind of also sit you down and say, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this?"
Yep.
There is easier ways, because it has to be thicker copper and just all kinds of other technical challenges around using direct fire. But I've always been a a big fan of the flavors that you get with direct fire. And that's really kind of at the heart of my still building. Was, we hope to produce top quality stills, but also stills that are inspired by distiller. So everything about how we did what we did was about creating flavor. And you just have a certain perspective, I suppose, as a distilling still maker. There's some things that wouldn't seem worth it if you were just a still maker, but if you're also a whiskey maker, it can seem worth it. So, yeah, we did that. And then when I moved on from there, that's when I joined up with Foley. So I've been working with them since the beginning of the year.
And their whiskey portfolio is impressive and includes different Scotch whiskies and things like that as well. So what are you enjoying most, and what whiskey? You're just back from Scotland, actually, so we should.
I'm just back from Scotland and Ireland. Yeah. So to touch on what you're mentioning, we have an agency relationship with the Loch Lomond Group, which obviously includes Loch Lomond, but also Glen Scotia and Spearhead and a number of
Mitch's
other
favorites. Mitch is the biggest Glen Scotia fan.
I'll be honest, I hadn't had exposure to that much until recently. And, Loch Lomond has been, I guess you could say, renovated as a brand over the last 10 years. And what they're doing over there is really tremendous. They've got, I'm not supposed to say this, but kind of this Willy Wonka distillery over there at Loch Lomond in terms of, they've got
crazy, right?
It's crazy.
I went down there last year, so I know what you're talking about. It's I say that you must be loving it.
Oh, I loved it with the top respect. I mean, basically, they've got just about every kind of still that you'd want to mess with. They've got full swan neck stills, then your full column stills, combination stills, and they're running, different. Well, not so much different mash bills. Well, yeah, different mash bills with the peat, but also just doing a lot of different runs through the stills themselves. So for instance, the straight neck still, they have a whiskey that they take with relatively tight cuts, and they have another that they take with wider cuts, and you get different characters, and then the blender blends those together. So that was tremendous. Had a tremendous time visiting with Ian McAllister there at Glen Scotia. Consummate Scottish gentleman, I have to say. No disrespect to you too, but he's a fine fellow. He gave us a very warm welcome, and we got to see the whole place and really taste some of the more recent work of his. And wow, I mean, just
was that your first time in Campbelltown?
Not my first time in Campbelltown, my first time at Glen Scotia. So I guess it was about was it 2012? No, it was more like 2014. I think I visited Springbank and enjoyed that.
Yep.
But this was really the in-depth tour of Glen Scotia, and
the juice is incredible.
They've done a great job. Yeah, they've just done a great job.
Yeah, it's a great spot as well. I mean, I'm a big fan of Campbelltown now. I remember going down there early 2000s, and it's changed so much since then. So we've chatted about it a lot, Campbelltown a lot on the show, actually, and just seeing all these other distilleries that are now getting built down there, and seeing this kind of revival that's going on. And in my opinion, Glen Scotia are one of the ones that are leading the way. I know a lot of other people say Springbank has been the case, but I mean, Glen Scotia,
I don't even remember it all, but yeah, they've been winning all kinds. I think they won best single malt last year, and I forget which, was it San Francisco or New York or both, but I mean, both Loch Lomond and Glen Scotia have been really excelling, both in the market, but also in the competitions. And understandably, they've got some really nice liquid. So I was 100%. Thrilled. And then we got to pop over to Ireland, my first time in Ireland. And so we have an agency relationship with I guess, blended brand called Two Stacks. I'm not sure if you've tried it before, but really nice stuff that's coming out of the Great Northern Distillery, but blended up by those fellows, and they're making great liquid. And then also got to visit probably one of the most unique distilleries I've seen in a while, Killowen. And you thought my distillery was small back in the day, Nicholas. You should see this place. I think they have a 800 liter still and a 500 liter still, and perhaps one in the side room. But I mean, these are true believers. These are guys working with the farmers next door to grow the grain that they use with the direct fire, and just really trying to trying to renovate, or I guess you'd say resurrect, what they see as traditional Irish whiskey. Um, I won't do it justice to give the whole spiel, but essentially, there's an argument that what has been done recently by some of the big distilleries is Irish whiskey, but it is kind of a more diluted version of what the original Irish whiskeys were in terms of mash bills and method and other things. And so they're trying to bring those characteristics back and have some really interesting stuff there. So that was a pleasure as well.
Really cool. And with your role at Folio, are you going to continue to build stills for other projects, do you think, or is that still to be decided?
I will give advice on building stills. I will in an absolute pinch, but being 50 years old now, it's kind of like being a football player at that age. Like, you can do it, but you regret it in the morning. It's not the muscles, it's the joints. All that banging is hard to recover from. So
yeah.
I feel like I'm still rehabbing from my years at Tate & Co. But we actually talked stills a little bit, some things that they were trying to increase some of the efficiencies in their system. And I had a few ideas here and there. So I'm hoping we'll get to go back there and maybe do a collaborative whiskey, to be honest.
Yeah. That's brilliant. And I think that's the one of the things, that the innovation that you brought to Balcones and the council and the advice that you've given to other brands that you've consulted with over the years have benefited from your expertise within that field as well, right?
Thank you.
So
thank you.
Is that, and then on that note, talking about, first of all, you mentioned, dealing directly with farmers and this kind of grain to glass experience. You've just created a Japanese whiskey project yourself, where you dive in and you're very kind of transparent about, and it's super cool, dude. Like, I have to tell you, I can't wait. Mitch, get it right up you. I've got a bottle coming to me. So this will be one of the first times, Chip. The running thing here is Mitch lives in Speyside. So every brand sends him whiskey. So every time we're on tasting or doing stuff, he's always got this lineup of amazing drams in front of him.
And you're way out there in New York, being left behind.
Exactly. Yeah. But apparently it's impossible to send a bottle of whiskey. A couple of brands have really gone above and beyond, and I have been taken care of. But in this instance, Mitch, I will probably get a little sample of this. So I'll be able to I'll keep some for you. Like I said, I've got a few things that Mitch hasn't had. But walk our listener through your journey looking at making malt whiskey in Japan. What did that look like for you?
Well, I'll be honest. It was a connection of a friend to a friend that put me in contact with Alex Kogan, who's running the project.
Yep.
And essentially he and I knew each other professionally through an acquaintance and decided to blend some stuff together. And we sat down and took a look at all the things he had, and he had a nice collection of Japanese whiskeys, which I hadn't expected. And they were super interesting too, because these were, I'm sure you're well familiar with all the ins and outs, being the Japanese whiskey nerd that you are, but these were just very, very pale for their age. They were very lightly aged.
Yep.
And as much as I enjoy, the wood influence, it's also really nice too. And you can see the spirit shining through even after some years of maturation. And these were that in spades. They were still slightly underdeveloped. I mean, at that age, that's not a surprise. And so we decided to kind of put a twist on it and take something that was very lightly barrel aged and then put it in a port cask, but only for a handful of months. We wanted just sort of the lightest touch of fruit and spice on top of that deep malt that was already there in the spirit. And that's how we came to make it. So
using was it 100% Australian malt?
100% Australian malt, distilled in the Nirasaki distillery.
Super cool.
So, yeah, exactly. So as you can see, and he was kind enough to put my name prominently on there. Thank you, Alex. So yeah, that's how it came together.
So is this out currently? Is it already dropped?
It is. It just came out. It just came out. As in the link for sale just went live yesterday. So
fantastic.
It's very limited, isn't it?
It's very limited.
Plug for it. So I was going to say, blatant plug. Where can people find it if they want to buy it?
Yeah. See, World of Whiskeys. Let me get the exact the exact link here before I mess it up.
We can always drop it in the show notes for you as well after this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is so this is worldwhiskey.com. So that's World Whiskey with an E. And then they have a number of products, but this is their on their site. So I'll send you the link, but it's World Whiskey, and again, that's Alex Cogan's organization.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's the World Whiskey Society is the full name of the organization, but their URL is worldwhiskey.com.
And they just do these very limited runs of really cool liquids. Yeah, it's pretty awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, the first time he sent me a bottle of stuff, it was this really rare bourbon, and he has these funny little stoppers. You can see this one with the Japanese. Yeah. So the first one he sent me had a unicorn on top, which is kind of fun. Because it was a one-off, as you could tell. Yeah,
I love that. That's pretty cool.
It's very playful, but it's also very well done. So, yeah, I'm pleased to have done something, and hopefully we'll get to do something else later. But this run is, as you mentioned, Mitch, limited 620 bottles, of which there are probably at least 500 available. Had some great early interest. So
it's not because you drunk the other 100 bottles.
No, I'm only responsible for 2. See, because you've got me at a distance here in Texas, so I'm limited in how much damage I can do. If I were too close to the stores, who knows?
The new role must be really fascinating because you're getting to look outside of the US, right? But if we go back to the US, which is where your I suppose heart and soul is when it comes to distilling, what's your opinion on whiskey making right now in the US, whether that be the big guys or the little guys? Like, give us an overview. What's your opinion on what's happening right now?
Well, it's interesting because I get to consult at kind of multiple different levels of the industry. So anywhere from, kind of giving financial opinions on where NGP whiskey stores are going to getting to visit Ireland and, sit down with Killowen's, 50 casks. But I just mean, there's some really great distilleries still out there. It's a hard time for small distilleries right now. I'm not going to lie. That's really the challenge, is that the big guys continue to do well. They always have the ability to absorb downturns in the market. There's a lot of concern right now about the lower dump numbers since last year. And so a lot of whiskey distilleries have just been worried about their cash position and their future prospects. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I think the industry overall is doing well, but the last 3 or 4 years has been really hard on small distillers. I've seen other than my own distillery, 2 or 3 of my good friends, some of which have been in the business for 15 years, have to hang it up because essentially just the small contraction in the market. It's tough being a small distiller because you're always trying to lay down more stock and age it longer. Your cash flows are small, your expenses are high, and it doesn't take very much. There was a lot of demand during COVID. And right after COVID, but even that was challenging for small distilleries in a way. If you had great distribution, then you were really able to benefit from that. But those that had sort of middling distribution suffered as well. So even though the demand was high, the market was weak. So it's interesting, but one American distilling success I should mention too, not just because I'm making a plug for Foley here, but it's true. Minden Mill Distillery is about to come out with their juice. And I think that should really be noted and celebrated for a number of reasons. That was originally the Bentley Heritage Distillery of Bentley automobiles, right? And that project's been going on, I think, for now either 6 years, 5.5, 6 years. And to make a long story short, Bentley built this beautiful distillery up in Minden, Nevada. It's about 45 minutes south of Reno. And then 5 years into the project, just didn't really want to stay in Minden anymore, I guess is the easiest way to put it, and abandoned the project. And it was looking like they were going to close the distillery and liquidate the equipment. And that's when Foley got involved and bought it. So not only do we save a great distillery, but there's 5 years of great distilling work that they put in. Johnny Jeffrey, who you may or may not have heard of, it was on that project for a while and put a lot of heart and soul into that. So, and now Joe O'Sullivan is the master distiller there, and he's done a tremendous job. So this summer and fall is when they'll be coming out with their first projects, their first bottlings. Yeah. So the bourbon, the rye, the American single malt. And I'm thrilled to be working with Joe for lots of reasons, including that he's a long time. He used to work with Steve McCarthy. As you may know, McCarthy's has been one of the very early American single malts out there of quality. Not the only one, but certainly one of the notable ones. And Joe worked with him for years, and he's definitely a single malt buff as well. So I'm very excited about what they're coming out with. It's been a long time coming.
Chip, do you get to get involved still in the blending process and helping putting some of the innovation behind some of these whiskies?
I'm doing a lot of blending, but not so much of their stuff. They have some in-house blenders. I've enjoyed tasting it and, working with them, but they really deserve the credit for what they'll be putting out in the fall. I do have other projects there that you mentioned it. I've got a really cool 6-year-old, soon to be 7-year-old Kentucky whiskey that I'm finishing. And I had Foley take a bunch of their ex wine barrels, and we stripped them down and retoasted them in a custom way and filled that liquid in, and it's now aging. Really interesting profile there, kind of a mix of traditional Kentucky and not so traditional wine barrels. And then there's a 15-year-old Kentucky whiskey that I'll be finishing off in a bunch of different casks this summer and fall, probably looking at a release middle of next year. So I've had lots of blending projects there. But then also I'm making some agave spirits as well. I've actually created a tequila. I won't say a tequila brand because it's not in the bottle yet, but the tequila exists down in Arandas, and getting ready actually week after next to go down to the Oaxaca region and make a mezcal.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's really a lot of great
pies, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of travel, but I relish the opportunity to get to create in so many different spaces. That's really a pleasure and a huge boon to me. So I'm enjoying it.
It's amazing to hear what you're doing, Chip. Being someone who's always been an innovator within the whiskey world, what excites you right now, and whether that's back home or somewhere overseas, with it, what gets your juices flowing within the whiskey world that you're seeing with regards to innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's the same sorts of things that I always have done. I'm a big believer in learning a tradition and then adding to it. So I think Nicholas was touching on this some with the constraining of parameters on the Japanese malt whiskeys versus what is Japanese whiskey, right? I think I love to see makers that aren't just kind of going wild or doing any old crazy thing, but are taking the traditions that they inherit and adding to them and creatively modifying them. I feel if you do exactly what you inherited as a tradition, you aren't really doing the same thing, because the people who created that tradition created something and you're just replicating it. And there's nothing wrong with replicating it, but it's not the same level of art as taking that and saying, okay, with all of this background and knowledge, and what would be interesting to add to this, to sort of tweak it, take it in a different direction. Sometimes even playfully. I mean, I forgot to mention I've got a couple of rye projects. We're looking at calling them brandied, because a lot of people love to finish things. I'm finishing whiskey in barrels, and the barrels certainly play a part in that. But I mean, I don't need to tell you two. Sometimes it's just how much Oloroso sherry is left in the Oloroso barrel. There's also kind of an incidental blending component in there. So these two their rye whiskeys are intentionally blended with different kinds of brandy or brandy related things. So one of them, for instance, is a mix of Calvados and rye whiskey, just slightly more rye whiskey than Calvados, to make it a whiskey, but that's kind of the play on it, right? That rather than having just a touch, it's 49%.
Yep.
It's that amp goes to 11.
Yeah.
And I actually have a bit of this really unique spirit. I was able to get some cognac barrels that I was keeping wet for 9 years. And so I filled them with some just neutral spirit. But 9 years later, the spirit that came out was anything but neutral. It's dark as midnight. And I'm blending that with some of the rye whiskey. So it's this cognac spirit, cognac influenced spirit blended with rye whiskey, which is actually, you can see my unofficial official bottling. This is
That's
just
cool.
from the distillery.
Is that natural color?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's all natural color. Yeah, all natural color. Yeah. So I'll show you real quick. Hold on. This is some of the liquid from the cognac casks. And I mean, you could drink it on its own, but 9 years in the heat with French oak gives you some pretty intense. You can see that's
wow, it's like molasses.
It's like molasses. And so it's about 1/4 on a proof gallon basis of that liquid, and then the remainder some really nice 95.5 rye whiskey that I was able to get hold of. So
Right.
those are just fun, fun things out there. But I always celebrate artists getting to play a little bit. That maybe sounds a bit flippant, but getting to build on top of what they inherited. Because I feel like if you don't add to tradition, it eventually dies.
I think that's absolutely spot on, and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
100%.
What does your day-to-day look like then, Chip? I was hesitant to ask that question because I've just heard you describe such a variety of different projects that you're working on, but we're like, what the hell does this look like then for you? Is this part of the charm that you get to? Does the ADHD side of you kick in and you get to have all the fun?
I do. I mean, I kind of have two different modes, to be honest, because I'm traveling, I'd say about 25% of the time, so there's probably a week to a week and a half in every month that I'm away. And then that's pretty obvious. If I'm down in Arandas, Mexico, making tequila, I'm making tequila. I get up, we get the stills going, making cuts, tasting things, blending, all the things distillers do. When I'm home, it's a combination of taking a bunch of wee little bottles and tasting them and blending them, and then Microsoft Teams meetings, and then blending, and then Microsoft Teams meetings. So it's that mix of corporate and independent work, but that's just how we keep track with all the projects and the teams. Because Foley's based out of Santa Rosa, California. So I try to make a point to stay in contact with everybody, and Minden, obviously, in Nevada, but a lot of phone calls and Zoom, Teams meeting, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Being part of Folio obviously gives you a little bit more buying power, shall we say?
A little bit, yeah. A little bit, yeah. It's not limited, but it's certainly more than I had, that's for sure.
For those there'll be plenty of people out here that in Scotland, especially, that maybe don't know who Bill Foley is. Is it worth letting people know just who's behind everything that you do right now?
Bill Foley, yes, that's a good point. Bill Foley is a very successful entrepreneur who really made his money in banking and insurance. I hope I'm construing that correctly, but a financier.
Yep.
And then for years has been involved in both hospitality and a number of properties, wine properties. So, the traditional business has been Foley Family Wines. And they dabbled in spirits a bit, I guess as long as 5 years ago. That was really just, so one of the whiskeys we have out is called Charles Goodnight. And that has a direct connection to Bill. That is his great uncle. So Charles Goodnight, for those who don't know, was a famous cowboy who, the Goodnight loving trail, everybody pictures of romantic cowboys from Texas. This was Charles Goodnight, running cattle up through here, Colorado, Nevada, and the whole thing. So that whiskey is created as a tribute to him, and is now, originally the first bottling was made in Kentucky, but it's now made in Texas. But yeah, the entree into spirits really got serious, or more serious, I should say, in 23, when they both bought the what was Bentley Heritage, now Minden Mill Distillery, and Lighthouse Gin, which is a nice craft distillery in New Zealand making gin. So those were the first two things. And then obviously when I came on at the beginning of the year, the idea was to take that base portfolio and to add to what Minden was going to have coming online with these blended bourbons and other things that I've been describing. Basically trying to build out a proper portfolio of spirits to offer the market. So, it's new and there's always some little hiccups to work through in a new project, but it's really exciting as well because I won't say the sky's the limit. I don't want Bill to think we're spending too much of his money, but I mean, we're certainly trying to think big in terms of concepts, really reaching to make some interesting and top tier spirits to put into the portfolio over the next 18 months.
Shit, if you're spending too much of Bill's money, then there's other things to be asked because Bill also owns the Vegas Golden Knights National Hockey League team.
That's fair.
Right?
That's fair. Yes, he has a penchant for sports teams for sure,
and he's got
football.
Yeah, he's got
soccer.
He owns 25% of Hibs, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So, in Scotland.
Yeah, I won't. I'm not enough of a sports buff to go into it all, but he owns some football teams in the UK as well.
Yeah, so he's got so Hibs in Scotland, and he's got Bournemouth, AFC Bournemouth.
Exactly.
In the Premiership, so that's pretty in the Premier League. So that's impressive.
Oh yeah, he's certainly and actually one of the first whiskeys that we released with that 15-year-old I mentioned that's now aging was called Predictum. And essentially he made a prediction that when he took on Las Vegas that they'd have the Stanley Cup within 6 years, and they did it.
Yeah,
they did it. So he's accomplished in a number of areas, and now hopefully we'll give him some medals to hang up on his bedside for the spirits as well. It's already started, but we're just getting going.
Well, I'm a New Jersey Devils fan, so if he can hook us up and get some ringside seats the next time those teams are playing, that'd be cool.
I'll put a good word in. Yeah.
Nicholas has turned into me now, Chip. I was always the one asking for freebies, and now it's him. You know what I mean?
Correct.
It's gone full circle.
He took a page out of your book. He learned a thing or two, right?
You can find out he's working for me. So
yeah. Catch up.
Chip, I've got one last question. So, people always associate you with making whiskey, and it's amazing to see you're still doing that. You're still there's still Chip Tate's name is on bottles of whiskey going out there. But is there ever going to be a Chip Tate whiskey that is 100% your own baby, built from start to finish?
You never ask. Speaking of things that we need from Bill Foley.
Now's your time to pitch. Go on, Dragon's Den.
That's right. No, I mean, you're right. It is wonderful to get to work with all these different distilleries, to travel, to have the breadth of exposure and opportunity that I have to make things. But what is nearest and dearest to my heart is getting to make whiskey from the very first moment to the very last. Although my days of making equipment may be done, I still, I'm somebody who's made breads from scratch and everything else from scratch, cheeses and whatnot. That's really where my heart is, and that's where my influence, I feel like, can be best applied. The sooner you get hold of something, the more you can shape it and influence it, and the more opportunities there are for all kinds of things. So the best opportunity I've had so far that way would really be the tequila. We're making oven roasted agave and using whiskey yeast to ferment it.
That's very cool.
It's not entirely different, but it is kind of a unique twist. And I love being able to take traditions and blend them together to add things to. So I would love to get my own distillery. That's what you're hinting at. But I think I'm hoping that will be in the cards at some point. And in the meantime, we'll just keep making things as we are, and hope we can score some points for the team. Yeah.
Well, look, Chip,
Yeah.
we've taken up way too much of your time on a Saturday
Not at
morning.
all.
I want to thank you for joining us. It's been a blast to catch up with you and
It
to see you
has.
again.
It
And I
has.
know hopefully we shall be sharing a dram in the not too distant future together anyway. I'm hoping we'll get together for that.
Yeah, indeed.
But
Indeed. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Chip.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Cheers, man.